Hello there, this is Greg Johnson making, and I'm making the Jabberwock from Jabberwocky. Jabberwocky is a nonsense poem from Lewis Carroll's 1871 sequel to Alice in Wonderland, Through the Looking Glass. This version of it I've made is very much inspired by John Tenniel's illustration of it. I'm thinking this is the real one, like he had to tone it down for a kid's illustration, but this is what a real one would actually look like. So I have a lifelong love of this guy and his poem. I think it's the poem that sort of introduced me to nonsense language, words that evoke without necessarily having meaning. Also, it's the poem where the word chortle was invented for the first time. Just learnt that like 5 minutes ago. But yes, still one of my favourite pieces of writing. It's the poem I memorise for school. It's the poem I recite in my head when I can't sleep. Although that's very rarely a problem now that I'm elderly. But yeah, I love this guy. This build by necessity kind of ping-ponged all over the place because you have to let that thing dry, so I'll just do that. I can't put that on yet because the wires need to go through the neck, and so it sort of jumps around and was hard to divide into chapters. So Act 1 is the build, Act 2 is the sculpt, and Act 3 is painting. The end. Do I use this bit? Some eyelashes from the pound shop, half a frog, some old fake flower stems, a little doll that came from the egg I made my Cathaidu from, didn't use her in the end, some little army men to give it a bit of soldiers. I always forget the word soldiers and say army men, it's a lifelong problem. Some little soldiers, a plastic bird's head I found on the ground, some more fake plants, a little resin brain, some floss picks, little plastic toothpicks, some fridge magnet Ys, a venom action figure, a few plastic dinosaurs, another plastic tentacle from my Cathaidu build, a couple of Incredible Hulks. I bought a big bag of action figures off someone on Facebook Marketplace, lots of beads, plastic skeletons, a model kit of an ant, some plastic cutlery, and some click-together baby toy tubes. So bust out the little screwdrivers. Did I film a close-up of this T-Rex roaring and its eyes flashing? Yes, and I deleted it by mistake. I thought it was nothing, but it wasn't. Right, so we're going to pull its guts out. There is its roar. Quite a clever design this. It's actually one LED put between a sort of hammerhead of two bits of plastic so that the red lights work in either eye on either side. So I've ripped out its roaring guts, and at the moment I'm planning to put them in the tail. That will change. So this is a Venom that came in my bag of action figures I got for a tenner, and I like it. I like its style, but I don't want to just rip it off and use it as it is, so I'm going to put its legs into its armholes, use the pelvis as the neck and the neck as the butt, and I'm going to switch it around because I feel slightly guilty if I just use a torso as a torso. So I try not to use arms as arms or legs as legs. This spinal column is lovely, but I want the spines, the fronticles, the platelets to arc away from the neck, because arcing forward looks weird, so I'm going to heat that up and pull it out and make it go the other way. These are plastic skeleton legs. These originally were just going to be used for their shape, but then my wife liked the legs as bones, so they end up being bare bone legs, which is kind of horrifying. So this Venom leg, I'm keeping for now the posable articulated knee joint, cut down the calf to a stump, drilled into it, put in a big long screw, a big floorboard screw, and then just put a load of hot glue inside the bones and shove the screw in there and let that set fully. Fridge magnet capital Ys as feet. It's a nice bifurcation with one thing at the back, so that works rather nicely. Thankfully this Venom only had one hand, so I could avoid the temptation of just using the hands as hands, because, you know, who wants to do that? So I'm cutting off the finger claws and I'm going to use them as toes. The jaws that bite, the claws that catch. This Y, I'm cutting down most of it, but I'm just using it as a base, filling it with hot glue, sticking in chopsticks. Definitely easier to stick the chopsticks in long and then snip them down once that glue has set. But this sort of looks a bit mad, but it makes sense. Then I realised these arms had big elbow horns that were quite fun, so those are the heel claw. I figured it would have proper, you know, claws on the backs of its feet, like a cockerel, like a talons. These are hair braid tubes or dreadlock tubes for putting hair through. They look a bit mechanical now, but I'm going to skin them over so they'll look more like sort of wrinkly toe joints, just sticking in the toes with hot glue. I did want to make this a cyborg Jabberwocky with robo legs, but I've realised that's a bit too Dan Does, and I didn't want to copy his cyborg oeuvre. This is a spinal column with a sort of fan blade thing along the bottom, so to make it curve the other way I've just snipped that ridge of plastic all the way along and then heated it slightly so I could make the spine curve and fit back in facing the other way. This is a model kit of an ant I've had for probably 30 years, and its abdomen, is nice to flesh out the belly and cover up the Spider-Man logo. Covering a spider with an ant. Is that anything? The refrain of every comedian, is this anything? These, again, didn't want to use arms as arms. These are dragon tails, and enormously proud of this. This is my favourite bit of the whole thing. Plastic horses as hands. From the set of little plastic soldiers I bought to give this one some scale, there were some horses, and I sort of saw them in their bag and thought, that makes a nice hand. So I've taken the spines off the dragon tails to use as claws, and for the thumb that is a dental toothpick plastic claw that I use a lot of from the pound shop. The head! Anyone know what that is? This is a plastic bird head I found on the ground, and at the moment I'm planning on using this plastic Halloween skull, but it's too big. But then actually use the jaw, which I just cut off. So everything's useful. As with most of these parts, super glue and baking soda it in place, and then skin that joint over with hot glue for a nice strong bond. It's nice to do something you know you're going to skin over with Milliput, because it can be quite messy. We're still being quite structural here, so it's just bond it all together and hack off the bits you don't want. Haven't yet glued the joints rigid, so the legs are still floppy, bendy. These are little resin hemispheres, little half balls that I bought a silicone mould that you'll see later, because I also use it to make the eyes. They're red because I was making some of my red dwarf cast frames that I sell on Etsy. So when I have some spare resin, or make some spare resin, I just fill up my little hemispheres mould. So I've got a load of domes. I also use one on top of the head in a bit, which looks like a little hemispherical fez. So stay tuned, something to look forward to. Hemispherical fez. Again, super glue to tack, hot glue to bind. Lots of super glue accelerator. I've got an awful lot of that stuff on my left hand, so hopefully it's not, I don't know, bad for you. And then drill through both hips and use another big longest screw I had to make a pelvic axle. And hot glue to taste. Cut the bird's head off, decided it wasn't right. Finger mouse. God, there's some 80s references in this one. Anyone remember Finger Mouse? So yeah, happy with this. Wanted it to be odd and wanted to use these click together baby toy tubes. Much more in keeping with the Tenniel illustration, we're giving it a big long neck. And my plan was that having this string fed through the neck, I would sort of tie it onto the wires and just pull the wires through. But I do end up cutting that neck in half again to get the wires through, but it's fine. These wings, I thought about making wings from scratch out of wire and old dried out wet wipes, but I just had these right there. So, you know, forgive me, because this just was too easy. But I'm cutting them down into a nicer shape, sticking some coat hanger into a groove to make the arm slightly more posable, because these are pretty flexy, and using, again, these toothpick things as wing claws, also inspired by Tenniel's drawing, and then just hot glue over the wire. So did use this bird's head as the back of the, what is it? I guess it's the back of the jaw. So stuck that on, but can't do the rest of the head yet because it's time for some electrocraft. So here I'm extending the wire on the T-Rex raw and eye lights, and I'm going to use two tea lights as well for the eyes. So the eyes have a permanent yellow flicker because it has eyes of flame, that's in the poem, but it also can roar and flash. Just testing the connection with some electrical tape. Look how overjoyed my hands are. I'm pulling out these bulbs from these Halloween Asda tea lights because they're a nice warm flame that flickers, and then I'm using this very flat battery pack because it's just the smallest, easiest to conceal or contain battery pack I've got. Oh dear, black and white. Soldering. I did some soldering. We don't talk about soldering. 2 hours. I'm enormously grateful to my wife for buying me a lovely soldering iron last Christmas that I've only just had the guts to use, but it didn't go well. I thought what I really need to do before I try it ever again is some of those helping hands, you know, those posable clips that will hold the wires together, because solder isn't sticky, so when it's molten things just come apart very easily. I later told my wife and she pointed out that she's actually bought me some of those, and I've since found them in the box where I put them. So I will try again. I'll get back on the horse. There is a blob of solder there, and now I'm encasing it in hot glue. I've stuck some bamboo skewer across as a an eye axle, snips off the excess bamboo skewer from either side, so now we've got two tea light bulbs fused together in series, I think, to the battery, and then separate from that we've got the extended raw and flash unit from the T-Rex, which I've chopped the ends off and I'm sticking it between the two eyes, holding it in with UV resin because super glue might cloud up the plastic. Nearly time to seal up the torso, so let's put the wings on. To attach them, I've just stuck in a little block of wood so I can drill into the body, and the wires that stick off the wings will just have something to go into. So if you're not quite sure how to attach something to a hollow thing, just hot glue in a block of wood. And then for the tail, I just need something hollow, so I'm using this bit of ribbed conduit wire, using a step bit to make its tail hole larger, and then just hot gluing in this bit of corrugated conduit as my tail. Getting the wires through. I think it's just that these wires were a bit more heavy duty than I expected, so they needed quite a lot of space to get through, and so I cut the neck in half to feed them through and just glued it back together, and so mildly fizzly. So the wires are now permanently stuck in there and coming out of the tail. Thought the backs of the knees were a bit boring and spotted that there were some little hooks on the backs of the ankles of the Venom figure, so chopped those off and stuck them on there to fill that gap. Nice to be doing anything that isn't Electrocraft at this stage. Oh, back to the Electrocraft. Wouldn't be a build of mine without using a cake base. Because I decided, right, yes, I finally decided this is going to be stuck to a base, then the raw unit and the battery pack and stuff are all just in the base, which is much easier than trying to hide them in the tail or in the chest and making it openable, which you could do with magnets, but I'm not doing that. So you can cut out bits from these cake bases, and because they're 2 layers of corrugated cardboard, you can just pull away the bit you don't need to hide your batteries and stuff. I'm trying to sort of organify it a bit by just smushing it down, sticking it down with hot glue, and then skinning it all with spackle or polyfiller. Press on nails. So my wife has recently discovered the absolute joy of stick-on nails, which look great on her, and she has lots of spare sizes she doesn't need. So I'm going to use them as plating down the front of the neck and down the tail. And because there'll be plates down the front of the neck, that will hide a seam. So I'm just skinning this kind of bomb site of a neck with a dried out makeup wipe, face wipe, or baby wipes. Any that have that kind of woolly, slightly pull apart texture are really good for skinning things. So I just put a skin on it. And then plated down the front with all these awesome nails, and down the back, and yeah, that was fun. Thought the butt end was a bit boring, so this is the very tippy tip of the T-Rex's tail. These are Venom's shoulders, using my mitre shears to chop those off, because I wanted to bulk out the belly a bit. And I thought, well, that's a nice sort of pleated, concertinaed, ruched dewlap. Hey! There you go. You see, Jabberwocky, the love of language. It's a ruched dewlap. Why not? Little skeletons. I made Minceman Christmas ornaments years ago, so I have lots of little plastic skeletons left over. And I thought, again, I want to make these ribs my own. I don't just want to use Venom's ribs. And as you can see there, I've got some more of those hemispherical red half balls, just to sort of flesh out the shoulders and the wing shoulders. They probably have a name. Spooky eyeballs, scary stuff. These are nice because they're really rigid plastic, whereas a ping pong ball is kind of squishy. Here I'm using the jaw I thought I wouldn't use from the skeleton. It has 4 rows of teeth. We'll never know why. Then hot glue to bulk out the lip shape, and a hemispherical fez to make the head longer. These are tentacle earrings. Love these things. If you're putting miniature tentacles on anything, buy some of these tentacle earrings. And I am straightening them out very carefully, a little bit at a time, with some pliers, because you can snap them easily. And his antennae end up being ant legs from the model kit Ant. One of the lovely things about scratch bashing that I love is just, it's not what you would plan, but it's what you've got. So it surprises you with the choices you end up making, and it's a real joy. Cut your toys up and stick them back together. Do it. And don't ask permission. I'm talking to the adults here. Get all your toys out and chop them up. And don't tell your children. Let's make some eyes. This is the aforementioned hemispherical silicon mould, little bit of clear 2-part silicon, some gold flocking glitter, some red for just little flecks, a little bit of holographic mica powder, and a dot of yellow dye. This ended up being slightly darker than I wanted, so I put in the same amount of resin again to make it this sort of champagne-y wee. It's a wee kind of wee colour, isn't it? Fill those in and let them dry, and then before it's time to start sculpting over the top of things using my pyrography tool, window open, respirator on, to raggedy up the edges of the wings. And that dramatic revelation is where we end Act 1. See, you can't turn off, you've got to know what happens in Act 2. Milliput. I've since learned that you can get black milliput, which would have been better for this. I wouldn't have had to paint around the eyes. But anyway, equal parts of each stick, mould them together for 5 to 7 minutes, and you've got a nice clay. Not a very long working time, so I've learned to mix it in smaller and smaller batches. Basically anywhere that needs blending, any of the joints, filling those in. And then this is a tip I've learned from various YouTube sculptors. If you put cling film over it, the details you cut or stab in will be gentler and more shallow, so it's particularly good for skin texture. Time to stick him back onto his base, so just using cardboard, a bit of old biscuit packaging to panel in over that battery pack, and then some more dried out wet wipe. I didn't want to cover over the speaker too much. I've been covering it with my thumb while testing it every time, because believe me, this noise gets very irritating. It doesn't need to roar 3 times, it's too many. And then sticking this onto the base with just hot glue, which worked fine, and smoothing it out. Here's a brief vloggy moment. I just thought I'd reconnect the wires for the tea lights in the eyes, twisted them together and just wrapped them in electrical tape. No soldering, we don't solder. And they weren't working. No matter how much I twisted them together, cut some more of the rubber off, twisted the wires together, pinched them together, swapped them over in case I've got red and black mixed up, they just weren't working. But it was just that the batteries needed changing, and I stayed very calm. That sounds sarcastic, but it's not. I did stay very calm. So don't panic. That's the lesson we take from this vlog, is just don't panic. All's well that ends well, but you never know that it's going to end well. That's the problem. So popping things out of a silicone mould is just always so satisfying, and I'm tacking these in with hot glue, but then sealing them in with UV resin. As I said before, super glue can fog up clear stuff, so I'm not using super glue. Teeth! It's raining teeth, hallelujah. These, unbelievable I already had these because they're so perfect. But in amongst all my silly fancy dress teeth are these little mini fake teeth that I think my wife bought me once. Find someone who understands you. So bulked out the interior of the mouth just with hot glue, and then because I liked it on my Cthulhu build, I used needles as extra teeth. Another lovely thing from Tenniel's drawing, I wouldn't have thought to do these quite blunt, you know, rodential incisors, these kind of ratty, beaverish teeth, but they just make it either more scary or less scary, and I can't decide. They're just a bit human, aren't they? So, put the wires in, test the eyes. Very happy with that. Another bit of biscuit box to panel in those wires, so it is now sealed. We have sealed the deal, so if it breaks now, it's broken. Does it break? I won't tell you. No, you've already seen me. Yeah, it doesn't. Sheet artificial moss, using it again because I love it. Cut out a circle, peel off the woolly stuff from the back, store up its leavings, which I will use as something. Obviously a bit fiddly to put it on once you've stuck the thing down, but for logistical reasons this was better. So just put slits in the back going up to the feet and the tail. It's got gaps in, so don't press it down with your hands because you'll get fresh hot glue, you know. Use something else to press it down, but it's good stuff. And now hiding the wires with this tail stump. I figured this thing's like a rattlesnake. It's got a thing on the end of its tail that it can grab you with. I like a tentacle. I like a tentacle. Didn't like the tail though, thought it was a bit boring, so put more dental floss toothpicks sticking out of each of the fingernails so it's more barbed. And then just some little details. Again, thought the neck was a bit dull, so looked again at the drawing and there's a slight spine, a slight ridge down the neck. So very thin worm of milliputs and just blended that in. You're at the stage now where you're just trying to get happy with it. Look for anywhere that looks a bit plain and think, what does that need? It's not quite prime time. This is a pre-priming prime. This is acrylic leather paint, which is flexible. It's really good for painting onto shiny or flexible plastic. So I thought, well, I'll paint the wings with it. But then I went a bit hog wild, so I thought, well, the legs are kind of shiny plastic, and well, that tentacle on the end of the tail is kind of shiny plastic. Basically I painted all of it. And then a pustule pass. So this is dry soup mix, it's lentils, split peas, I think there's some half chickpeas in there if you need a really big one. Just to unify it all and get some even texture over the whole thing, a load of pustules, which are never a mistake. It's already prime time. Happy prime time, everyone. So blue tack to mask over the eyes when you're painting it. I'm about to re-mask, as you can see there, I put some fresh blue tack in because I thought dry brushing, I didn't want to get paint on the eyes. Once again using the slap chop technique, so get a mid-grey, get most of it off your brush, almost all of it, and then just lightly dry brush to get some grey. It's hard to film slap chop. I think you can kind of see it happening there, but it just hits all the raised areas. Dry brushing the grass with yellow ochre. Decided green was obvious, so I'd go with autumnal colours. Yellow ochre, brown where it's more muddy, and some greeny grey to create a kind of heather moss look. And then now that the dark grey is dry brushing with a very light grey, almost white. And it just brings out all the details and it's really enjoyable. Another detail I wouldn't have thought about doing if not for the drawing is hairy fingers. So I bought these pound shop eyelashes, and it just gives the fingers a nice weirdness. You're looking for weirdnesses. Lavado Verde, this is Vallejo Green Wash. So for slap chop you want to use washes, contrast paints, speed paints, inks, clear colours. This kind of starts out as slap chop, but then I do paint in some of the shadows as well with this Militarum green. And I think it's nice for your shadows to be a different tone from your highlights. Then again, purple and green, can't go wrong. This is Gene Stealer Purple, which is a layer paint. Much more opaque than a contrast or a wash. Doing some lines around the mouth. This, dry brushing gold over green. For anything dragony, it's very Narnian. It's very Voyage of the Dawn Treader. Although then it made the claws, which I'd painted gold, not stand out anymore. So then, looked again at the drawing, they look black. So this is gloss black on the claws, the toe claws, and the tail barbs. And now I'm trying to do some very fine black eyeliner. I will use black Milliput in future. It'll be the first thing I add to my Amazon wishlist. Popped to the local gaming shop because I didn't have any clear yellows, so this is a nice bright yellow, again inspired by the drawing. It's nice to have something that makes your decisions for you. However, these bone legs, these are my own choice, because my wife just said, oh, that'll look good when the legs are like pale like bone. And I thought, right, let's do that then. Doomfire magenta on the sort of fleshy, shiny bits. I decided to put some kind of raw flesh on the torso because the drawing is actually wearing a red waistcoat. So I decided that was inspired by its kind of skinless, Hellraiser style horrible body. And then this is Skeleton Horde, which is a really nice shadow to put on old bones. What am I doing here? Ah, yes, so I used the yellow from the wings on the plates on the neck and the tail and didn't like it at all. So here I'm testing what does the yellow look like with my two different green washes over the top. There's quite a lot of that on this one, of painting something and then painting it a different colour, because I thought, nope. Here, a way to make black slightly more interesting is some blue glitter paint over the top. And then because I liked that, I used my gold glitter paint on the plates. I figured the neck plates and the tail, it's some sort of slightly metallic, though organic plating, so they have a sparkle to them as well. Bit more dry brushing on the autumnal grasses, and then tufts. Wouldn't be a build without tufts. And then sprinkle on some homemade flocking. It's just blended up dry herbs with a bit of sand in to cover up any bare super glue left uncovered because it's shiny. This is some lovely sort of vanilla spiced tea my wife bought, I think 2 years ago, and it just works really nicely as autumn detritus. So put red and brown flecks into your green grass and it looks super. Then this paint is Disgusting Slime, which is an effect paint, so it's shiny and nice and thick. It's a secondary pustule pass, just bright green dots that really heighten the greenness of it all. And finally, once that's all dry, this is a couple of days later, because I got busy doing a whole other job that I'll tell you about in a minute, this is 3D Crystal Lacquer, which is just a clear gloss lacquer to shiny up its wet parts. And on that bombshell, let's have a look at the finished thing. 'Twas brillig, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the borogoves, and the mome raths outgrabe.
Beware the Jabberwock, my son, the jaws that bite, the claws that catch. Beware the Jubjub bird, and shun the frumious bandersnatch.
He took his vorpal sword in hand, long time the manxome foe he sought. So rested he by the tumtum tree, and stood a while in thought. And, as in uffish thought he stood, the Jabberwock, with eyes of flame, came whiffling through the tulgey wood, and burbled as it came. 1, 2, 1, 2, and through the vorpal blade went snicker-snack. He left it dead, and with its head he went galumphing back.
And hast thou slain the Jabberwock? Come to my arms, my beamish boy. Oh, frabjous day, Callooh, Calais.
He chortled in his joy. 'Twas brillig, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the borogoves, and the mome raths outgrabe. Firstly, a million billion thanks once again go to Andrew Lehman of the H.P. Lovecraft Historical Society. So soon after the Colour Out of Space Well, I've got him doing a voice. So he played the father there in Jabberwock, which I knew he would do wonderfully well, and he did. Thank you, Andrew. Love you lots. Secondly, apologies that this video is a week later than I wanted it to be. I got an exciting job this week and ended up having to put everything to one side and make videos for the Beef and Dairy Network live show in London. Check it out. It is my favourite comedy podcast, and it's an honour and a joy to be involved. This week's YouTube channel recommendation is Nendo Zyka, or Snail. Brilliant, just polymer clay sculpting, no talking, some very nice rock and roll riffs going on in the background. And the most recent video, the polymer clay ship in a bottle, I think is one of the most amazing crafting achievements I've ever seen. By amazing I mean the fiddliest. So I don't want to do that, but yeah, this person's brilliant and a bit of a burst of joy, so recommended. Thank you as always to my wonderful patrons. Welcome aboard to new schematic patron Smokey. If you're in a position to help the channel grow and aid me in keeping on making these videos, then please do consider becoming a patron on Patreon, link below. Thanks. Or if you're scared of commitment, another lovely way of supporting me is I now have an Amazon wish list, which other makers do, so I'm doing it too. So if you'd like to contribute something to my making process, whether it's the black milliput I mentioned, that I've only just discovered is a thing, some Mod Podge, some super glue, because we know how I get through that, and I will personally thank you for it on screen while using it, unless you don't want me to. But yeah, I've got an Amazon wish list. It's not my birthday or anything. Or is it? I don't know. Halloween presents, that's a thing. We all buy each other those. Exciting things coming up because of course October, I mean every month is this really, but October particularly is Monster Month. Thanks very much for watching, lots of love from me, and I'll see you soon. And also adding 2 tea lights. Oh, nearly sneezing and then not. How unsatisfying. Wanted to capture a live sneeze.